let you all know that the president of First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce was going to be here tonight, but unfortunately she caught the bug that's going around. So she wanted me to at least leave you with these words and of thanks and gratitude for your attending. But First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce was founded in 1992 to serve as a conduit for Hispanic entrepreneurs in Northeast Florida. It's meant to advocate for opportunities, education, resources, and tools. And what's interesting is that through grants and donations, that's how they're able to continue to drive their mission, which of course we're seeing today, which is part of their mission is to, through culture and history and different types of activities, to drive forward their mission and their vision. You do not have to be Hispanic to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce. So I thought that was really cool, yeah. And in fact, I think the person who is doing our Starlight Gala tomorrow is non-Hispanic, but she's really very wonderful and loves to be around, Angela Merritt. Our programming is mainly in English, with the exception of workshops, and some of those are in Spanish. So she invites anyone and everyone to please come. So, now that being said, I have to thank them profusely for the funding and the sponsorship to not only First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, but also to My Advantage Marketing, who were the design creators and the concept of the exhibit. So I need to recognize the designer creator right here, Maria Montoya.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
And she's done a lovely job. So thank you so much. I'm eternally indebted. Okay, so here we go. I'm hoping that the technology will work for me. Okay, that's again about the sponsorship. Jacksonville of 1911. I'm kind of going through the old history, just very quickly though. This is what it looked like with this ship, and I can't remember what the name of that ship was, but that it's not the Three Amigos, because I think that one's a little different. But it's one of the ships that were being there in the river, and I kind of wanted to show before and after. Let's see. Okay. As we all know, or perhaps we don't, La Villa area, and especially around Bay Street in Maine or Pine, was one of the hubs of the Latin community back then. The Cuban cigar makers and their cigar factories were all around there. And these are an example of a boarding house, and then this is Jose Wu's cigar store that was there. And whenever I was reading some information about him, it was amazing how much money this gentleman earned from making cigars. I want to say it was something like $200,000, and back then, you know, he must have been like really rolling in the dough, so to speak. So it was amazing. Okay, and then this is his brother-in-law's company, actually, the G.H. Gatto and Company, and I was able to find this wonderful looking ad, which I thought was so telling. There's the babies with the cigars.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, the Cuban era of Jacksonville was the early 1900s. The population of Cubans in Duval County was 42 Cuban men and 25 women. I remember when I first started researching a lot of the history in the Jacksonville archives, I was going through all the phone books or the directories, and you could just see which families would move out. And before too long, I think I got to 1920 and hardly anyone's there anymore.
Oh.
So it was, they had all gone back to Cuba, and just like Jose Wu did after the dictatorship was changed. So he was definitely a Cuban patriot, and would have Jose Marti, the Cuban revolutionary leader, here in Jacksonville, I think for a total of 8 times he came to visit. And he was, of course, the owner of the Wu Cigar Factory, and he manufactured this Modelo cigars. And then Gabriel, the G.H. Gatto, Gabriel Hidalgo Gatto was his brother-in-law. In 1920 to 1925, I'm showing you a picture here of this house in Springfield, which was the Cuban embassy. And it served from the embassy from 1921 all the way until 1916, whenever Batista fell. And actually, this Mr. Julio Rodriguez-Enville was the ambassador the entire time. So I thought that was pretty amazing too, that he was here in Jacksonville. And it's located at 1533 North Pearl Street in Jacksonville. And of course it served as a council. Okay, Christina Carles is second from the right. She was very active. She was from Spain, and her husband also was from Spain, and they moved here in the mid to late 1920s, and he was an import-export for fruit. And so they were on a mission to increase the import and the export between the Latin American countries in Jacksonville. So that was kind of her main goal, and she also created a Latin American club. I can't remember the exact name of it though. I have to apologize for that. But it was part of the Chamber of Commerce back then, and she used to have a lot of galas and things like that for the population here, for everyone. So they were very well-to-do and very noted in the community. Okay, and this is the La Villa neighborhood, or La Villa, I forgot how it's pronounced sometimes, being from a different area of the country. I go back into my Spanish, La Villa. And this is from 1920 to 1930. This is Manuel Rivera. That's his Manuel's tap room. He was a lighter-skinned African-American or Cuban-American, no, Puerto Rican, sorry. Pedro Mendez was a Cuban. And they were two very prominent businessmen in the area. Pedro Mendez had his original tailor shop there in the Masonic Temple on La Villa and Broad Street. And as you know, I think his family is still here, and his daughter Padrica is still in the city. And in fact, she still lives in the original home that he had built in La Villa. And it's one of the few in La Villa that's been spared.
I think that the family opened up a tailor shop in the San Nicolas, San Marco area, because I remember that it was the Mendez. This was many, many years ago.
Yeah,
and
because
the
I know
shop
his
was there, and
son also.
he had a, so it had to have been the son, had an incredible reputation for his workmanship and how good he was.
And apparently Padrica, when she came back from Europe, from her opera career and acting career, she opened up a tailor shop as well, or she took over that tailor
She
shop.
may have taken over the tailor shop.
And she was also a dress designer,
Oh, wow.
which is very interesting, and she's still alive, of course. Now this gentleman, he has a very interesting story. I learned about him from an older gentleman that called me from the Jacksonville Historical Society, and he said, "Have you heard of Harry Gonzalez?" And I'm like, "No." And so he said, "Well, I used to work with him." And he always stated that his children were Hispanic. And he said, and it really, he was very proud of that fact. So I found out, I researched him, I found out he is a 5th generation Floridano from Pensacola. So that would have been the second wave of Spaniards that were here in Pensacola. And he moved into the River City from Pensacola in 1937. And first he started working for a dairy, I want to say Borden's Dairy or one of those dairies. And then he got into the real estate business, and apparently he worked at one of the firms, one of the more prestigious firms here, Watley.
Sergeant Watley and Adam,
That sounds familiar.
because I think he either has a in Mayport, I just, that name.
Okay, it could
Maybe it
be,
was
or
his
it could have
son.
been his son too, because I looked at some people, well, they're down south of him. But anyhow, so he was part of the Chamber of Commerce, the Club of 100 here in Jacksonville. He was one of the founders and board members of Flagler College. He was president of the Mental Health Association of Jacksonville, and I want to even say maybe even the state association. He was appointed to the JTA, or before it was JTA, I think it was called something else, like the Railroad Authority or something. I can't remember exactly what, but it was like JTA now. He was appointed by Governor Claude Pepper into that position. And then he also he went from real estate into developing, and he developed, what did I say?
Oh gosh, now I forget.
No, I forget, the one down south, PGA National.
PGA National, thank
He
you.
developed PGA National down south, and also, I remember this because I used to live nearby, Amayaku Country Club in that community in South Florida. So he came here, and was here until the 1970s, I think. Then he retired and moved down south to South Florida, and he passed away there in South Florida, and his family seems to have stayed there, the bulk of them. So he was a real mover and shaker when he was here, though. Okay, 1940 to 1950, the census for Hispanics in Florida was 25,000. And in 1940 to 1947, a gentleman by the name of Ramon Ureta served as the Argentine consulate and the Venezuelan consulate. So they kind of like wore two hats. Also, I spoke to an elderly Cuban woman, again from the Historical Society, and she was telling me that her and her husband used to go visit their relatives in Cuba, and that they would drive to Tampa, their car, they would load the ferry, and then they'd go to Cuba, visit their friends and family over the weekend, and then drive all around in Cuba, and then come back to the ferry and drive home. And she said that was a very commonplace practice for them to do that at that time. So I thought that was very interesting, and I was able to find some of the brochures from the Havana Ferry, and it went from Tampa to Key West to Miami and Palm Beach in 1945 to 1966, and it was $42 round trip. So a real bargain, and it included meals and I think a show. Okay, 1950 to 1960, there was no data for Hispanic population in Florida. Either we all disappeared or they just stopped counting us. I don't know exactly what happened. But one figure that did come into town was this baseball player. And I wish I would have had my notes. I can't remember his name. He's very famous. He was with the Jumbo Shrimp. What were the Jumbo Shrimp before they were the Jumbo Shrimp?
Sons.
The Sons. Yes, he played there for them. I want to say Jackie Robinson, but I know that's not right.
No.
But anyway, he stayed with Manuel Rivera, the owner of Manuel's Tap Room. He stayed at his home during the time that he was playing ball for the Sons here in the area. And of course, he became very famous, and he soon left Jacksonville and went on to the big leagues. So I have to find out who that is. I'm sorry. I wasn't going to talk about this tonight, but
I told her you guys would like the early stuff, so I made her.
So naturally, I forgot everything on this one. But I do know that this is Padrica Mendez, and that's a picture of her from when she was in Europe. And she was actually in a lot of spaghetti westerns, it seems. Okay, and 1960 to 1970, that was the year that we had an explosion. And of course, that's due to the Cuban refugees fleeing from communist Cuba. So the year 1960 brought a tidal wave of changes to Florida as our island neighbor Cuba was engulfed in revolution. Waves of Cuban refugees made their way into the River City due to Fidel Castro's communist takeover. Legendary baseball promoter Bobby Maduro, the owner of the Cuban Sugar Kings, was one such refugee. He narrowly escaped the Bay of Pigs invasion the day before it occurred, according to his granddaughter, Christina. And Mr. Maduro's baseball club, the Sugar Kings, or Cubanos, I noticed that they all have a Cubanos across the chest, was a winning minor league team in Cuba. Even, I have a few pictures of Fidel Castro actually dressed in their uniform playing on the ball field. And apparently he pitched at a game for 2 innings. And he was a huge fan, and he didn't want them to leave. After the unfortunate political events, the club came to the River City initially with great support, but the popularity waned. So Maduro eventually moved to Miami after selling the team. And while he was a Miami resident, the stadium down south was named in his honor, and it's called the Bobby Maduro Miami Stadium. Unfortunately, it met the wrecking ball and was demolished in 2001. Also, as a youth, Bobby Maduro attended Bowles School in Jax for a short time. So he did have a history here in the River City. Okay, now this photo on the right shows Antonio Gonzalez, and he's the owner-operator, he was, of Gonzalez Automotive. He was a Castro-era refugee who opened his shop in the 1960s. And in an article from the Times-Union, he made a point of hiring Mariel-era refugees, which I thought was very interesting. But, unfortunately, he didn't have very great success, and only one of those people stayed with him, and his name was Melvin Dominguez. So I'm kind of proud of that, because those Dominguezes don't let go. And this photo right here shows, of course, Gonzalez demonstrating how to measure for crankshaft repair to his fellow Cuban Francisco Robles. And this photo is from about the 1990s. I think it said 1992. Okay, it's time to change. Okay, the First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce chairman of the board, Wilfredo Gonzalez, has lived in Jax on 2 separate occasions. He's of Puerto Rican descent via New York, so what do they call them? Nuyorican? Nuyorican? Yes, that's what he calls himself sometimes. But he initially came to Mayport as a young sailor with the U.S. Navy. And interestingly enough, while in Northeast Florida, Gonzalez will tell stories about how he suffered racism during the time he was here. He would be refused service at lunch counters. He was picked up by police for hitchhiking, and he laughingly joked, the police didn't know what I was. They would ask him, what are you? And the sheriff, apparently in Central Florida somewhere, along I-95, stopped him, took him to the police station, and was going to arrest him, but then in the car, apparently, they started talking, and he said, well, where are you from? And he said, well, I'm on a ship in Mayport. What ship are you on? And he told him the name of the ship, and he says, oh, my nephew's on that ship. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave you at the Greyhound bus station, and I want you to go. I don't care where you go, but I don't want to ever see you in my town again. So that was his experience, and he still laughs about it and jokes about it. But I thought that was very interesting that they were on the same ship together. So after his stint with the Navy was over, he returned to New York and Washington, D.C., enjoyed an illustrious career in the U.S. government, in the State Department, and his career path eventually led him back to Jax. So he has kind of a love-hate affair, it seems, with Jacksonville. And he came back in 1996 as a Small Business Administration Regional Director, and thankfully he's never left. In fact, he's still with us. And he's one of the honorees, and I'll show you his picture a little later on. The Club Cubano, and I think probably this is the newer one, isn't it? On the Loyola or something, I can't remember the name of the street exactly. But it was served as a social hub for Cubans to meet and greet fellow Cubans. Apparently, there was a Times Union reporter by the name of Roberto Mures, and his daughter Gigi Rosada will tell me about him, and that he was very actively involved in the Cuban community and would take people, the new people who would come into town, would take them to the post office, to the government agencies, to the community services, and help them out, be a helping hand. So she was very proud of him for that. And of course, they were very active, as I said, in the Cuban American Club. And she came early in the 1960s, and she met her husband, Dr. Miguel Rosada, there at the Cuban American Club. And she said that her mother made her go to this formal, and she didn't want to go, but she's so happy she went because that's where she met her husband. So you never know what would happen. Of course, the club eventually declined, and they donated the 5 acres of land and the building to Lorsey Road, and it's now part of the Catholic Diocese of St. Augustine. Now, Mr. Tomas Jimenez, who is also one of our honorees, states that his father was also one of the founders, so I have to investigate that a little further and find out. So I'm kind of, tonight I've been asking about the Cuban American Club a lot. And now it's called the Father Felix Varela Center in honor of the Cuban priest, according to Manuel Granados, who is one of the founders. Okay, I'm going to, and that's, this is the couple that met there at the Cuban Club.
Is Dr. Rosada, is he also a priest?
Yes, he's an Episcopalian or Lutheran priest, and
I just remember.
his church is named
St. Luke's?
St. Luke's, yes. Yes. Very nice
St.
couple.
Luke's Episcopal, and the one in Arlington, right?
Uh-huh.
Is he still there?
Yeah, he's still there. They're still very active. Okay. We're going to talk about the prima ballerina, Dulce Anaya.
My daughter took ballet from her.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, God bless her. Well,
I think she must be 100 now.
I was going to say, I know she's very old.
Yes, she rented that place for a while.
I just remember you saying your daughter took dancing.
Yeah, well, she arrived in 1970 in Jacksonville, and she studied ballet in Cuba, and she's very petite and tiny.
Yes.
And, I mean, they were very doubtful at first, I think, that she would even dance, but she was persistent, and she was accepted into the American Ballet Theater and studied under George Balanchine. And after that, she went to Europe and became a prima ballerina and performed in the best opera houses and symphonies and everywhere. So she was very, very good. And her story has been featured on Univision in Miami, and the Florida Times Union has an article about her. And in 1970, she also founded the Jacksonville Ballet Theater, and I think they're well noted for doing the Nutcracker, if I'm not mistaken, during Christmas season. Now, she's supposed to still reside in the Riverside area, and I think she still has a dance studio, for all I know.
She may. I don't know where she would have the studio because my daughter moved on, so I lost track of her. But I ran into her a few years back, and I couldn't believe how she looks so good, and I thought, oh my God.
I wish I looked that good at her age at 9
This
years.
woman must be ancient.
Yeah, I think she's at least in her 90s.
Oh, at
If
least.
not, yeah. Okay, now, a little bit of interesting trivia here. This gentleman, Ken Amaro, is Puerto Rican. His father is from Puerto Rico, and he did grow up on the islands, but you know, just like all kids, would go back and forth to Puerto Rico to visit family. And he does say, though, he does admit that his Spanish is not the best, but he tries. So, of course, he caught the TV bug when he came here to study broadcast journalism at Jones College in Jackson.
Interesting.
And he began working part-time at first for First Coast News, and he never left until after 42 years he retired. So he's been around a long time, and I know we all know and love him as our consumer reporter, right? I remember seeing him all the time. He received 4 Emmy Awards for his work in the media industry and was awarded an honorary doctorate from Jones College for his outstanding contributions to the community. He's also, of course, the first Afro-Latino broadcaster in Jacksonville, and he is now one of the city councilmen for the area. Okay, time to change. Whoops. Okay, here we go. 1980 to 1990. The Mariel boat lift, which we were talking about earlier, brought another wave of Cuban refugees into Florida and Jacksonville. Many people suffered during the journey, but their resilience prevailed as they joined family members that they'd been separated from sometimes for more than 20 years. I've talked to some families who were able to get out initially, and then they were on the waiting list, or they had a really high number for the lottery and they weren't able to get out, so they didn't see their families for at least 20 years until the Mariel boat lift came around, and that's whenever they were able to reunite. And of course, the stories that they tell about those makeshift boats are very harrowing. So, the Hispanic population, of course, grew again. And in 1981, pastors Joffrey and Elia Vivoni arrived from Puerto Rico and founded the Jacksonville Hispanic Church of God. And of course, her husband died, but now she is leading the congregation, and it's under her guidance, and it's still very well attended by people.
When you did that census number, I'm just asking for my own edification, but is that people that are, and I'm probably wrong, so forgive me, but 100%, how do you they just say they're Hispanic, or, because we had trouble in a study we did one time of deciding how to figure out.
Yeah, I know, and even now, it's very difficult. I don't know how they were doing it for this particular census, I don't remember. But I know sometimes they will say, they will just go into your ethnicity as you determine, or as you print off, or check off. And then other times, I think a lot of them don't get recognized because they don't understand, they don't understand it. So I do think that it's probably, the figures are a little bit more than that. A lot of them were ashamed also to state that they were Hispanic.
Does Judith Rodriguez still teach at UNF?
She is a emeritus professor.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and she's still very active.
She's another one I knew.
Yeah, she's wonderful. Now, when Victor Cota arrived in the U.S. Navy in 1985, he made a big splash. He immediately began the Fiesta Playera Hispanic Cultural Festival and exposed Jacksonians to a lot of Latin culture that had been missing in the city for a long time. So this was the only one that I could find that at least had something Hispanic looking on it. But apparently the Fiesta Playera take place at the beach.
Yes.
Right? And that was a particular religious ceremony, and you would get into the water and then walk backwards.
I don't know about that.
I don't know if that's
they
the
took place
one.
at the beach.
Yes, but they took place at the beach. And he was very well known for that. And then, of course, a few years later, he opened up the first Hispanic or Spanish-speaking radio station, and it was on for 3 hours on Saturday and Sunday, just on weekends only. So he's kind of been a groundbreaker for sure for the community. In 1988, Hispanic Heritage Month was decreed by Ronald Reagan, and we went from celebrating for a week to a month. So you know, us Latinos are party people, so it's great because now we have a longer 1 month party. So I'm really happy about that we got a month. Now we're going to talk about Dr. Judith Rodriguez. She's an amazing, fascinating person. She's a nutritionist. She was hired by UNF with the goal of opening a nutrition program. She was the only one in the department that was certified in both, I think, nutrition and dietetics. And they brought her in, and she became the first Hispanic director of the nutrition program and part of the professor of the nutrition faculty in the Brooks College of Health. And apparently, the Brooks College of Health wasn't even formed until 1990, and so then she kind of was slid in, and that's how she got her position there. She's a very prolific writer and researcher, and she's authored numerous books and created several booklets for the Jacksonville Health Department on nutrition for Hispanics. She's also authored a study on the obesity in the Hispanic population and served as a national and international president for the Academy of Nutrition. And of course, she's one of our honorees. So as you can see, 1990 to 2000 now is coming up, and it's jam-packed with milestones. There were 17,000 Hispanics in Duval County in 1990. Victor Cora, who there is at the center, founded the first Spanish radio station, and he also told me about a gentleman by the name of Ed Marcial, who had a restaurant called Ed's Spanish Cookery. Well, apparently, Mr. Marcial had a little cart near City Hall somewhere at first, and he would sell little Cuban things, or treats, and he won the lotto. And he won $5,000, and with that $5,000, he opened up a little restaurant there in the downtown area near the courthouse. And I don't know how long it was in existence, but he ended up having to close it eventually. During the 1990s, also the El Heraldo Latina newspaper was founded by Colombian Carlos Miranda, and it was the first Spanish newspaper in North Florida. Miranda also wanted to open a radio station, but I don't know if that ever happened. I think they had to wait for Jorge Lopez to come around, which we'll talk about him a little later. In 1994, Havana Jack's restaurant opened, and they were the first Cuban restaurant in Jacksonville, and it was owned and operated by Renee and Sylvia Pulido. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but Sylvia is from Nicaragua, and her husband Renee was from Cuba, and so she had to learn, well, I guess she probably already knew how to cook Cuban food, but yeah, she would specialize in that. I asked her if she ever served anything that was more Nicaraguan oriented, and she said, well, sometimes, but people come here and they want to eat Cuban food, so I stick to the Cuban entrees. Okay, and I have to thank the archivist, Tammy Kiter from the Jacksonville Public Library, for looking up all of these fantastic articles that I have here. As you can see, she was able to find those. A lot of these things have been hidden, and I was able to have her find them because I gave her the years. And that was what kind of opened up Pandora's box. Okay, now this document in 1991, I'm going to see if I did this correctly or not. Yeah, I did. Okay. In 1991, Latinos in the community became politically active and on fire. Why? Well, there was increased activity was because of the set-aside program that excluded numerous minority groups, including Hispanics, Native Americans, and Filipinos from procuring city contracts. The city of Jacksonville had to conduct a disparity study. And minority group leaders organized to recruit their members to be interviewed. The study above looked specifically at discrimination against Hispanics. And these are the bylaws, so I think I got my slides mixed up. But these are the bylaws from the Hispanic American Business Association, which was the forerunner of the First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And that was opened as a result of having this set-aside program and being discriminated against, or they thought, but we'll see whether or not it happened. And this was specifically in Duval County. And these two gentlemen that we're about to see are the founders of the Hispanic American Business Association. And that did found in 1992. Clark Vargas was an engineer and had an engineering firm, and actually apparently the water supply or the water filtration system that's in place in Jacksonville right now is one that he built many, many years ago. So it's still in operation, and he was very proud to claim the claim to that. Okay. Clark was originally from Barranquilla, Colombia, and he moved to the United States in 1960. His family's migration was facilitated by his mother's dual citizenship, which she obtained through her American-born father. Interestingly, her father was a gold miner who moved to and immigrated to Colombia during that time. So that's how they were able to come. Clark earned his master's degree in engineering from the University of Florida and served as an officer in the U.S. Army's 249th Corps of Engineers. He was deeply committed to community service and had leadership roles in the community. And he was a Rotary Club president as well. Oh, I see what happened. My printer got my got my pages out of order.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah. So let's see where I'm at. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Oh, no, I can't go on because I haven't talked about Pepe. Now, Pepe has a very interesting history. From the looks of him, he's a very handsome gentleman. Well, imagine him 40 or 50 years ago. He's a really hot-looking dude. He's a Cuban refugee, moved to Miami, grew up in the music scene there in Miami, and formed a band, a Latin band. He was the lead guitar and one of the vocalists, and apparently they were the rave, they were the Latin Beatles, and they had the fans to match. And so they even recorded a song, and he was like what do they call it, a one-hit wonder? But it was calling Vaya Cayendo Mis Lágrimas, My Tears Are Falling. And so he loved music. He didn't want to give it up. So when he went to UF and got his degree in architecture, he stayed another year or two and got a degree in civil engineering, a master's in civil engineering, so that he could still be in the band that he was performing with. And he actually said that when he was looking for architectural jobs, that the pay that he was earning as a musician was a lot more than what he had earned as an architect. But he was persistent. He opened up his firm in 1981, and then in 1991, he became a PQH group, which I think that you might have seen them around a lot. He's done a lot of buildings here in the area. So he's a very nice gentleman. And of course, he was one of the founders of HABA. Okay. There's Wilfredo Gonzalez. He was the one who was stopped by the nice sheriff in Central Florida. And as I said, he came here again to Jacksonville as a regional director of the governmental agency, the U.S. SBA. But prior to coming to Florida, he was in Washington, D.C. and Virginia as the SBA director for that area, and then prior to that, he'd been in Atlanta. So he's had a very long, illustrious career. He actually served in the administration for Bush 1, and then after that, he took a position working for Clinton's administration. So he's certainly been around the block a few times in the U.S. government. And of course, now we're very fortunate that we have him as one of our, as the chairman of the board from First Coast Hispanic. He's been so beneficial to all of us, and a very down-to-earth gentleman. Okay, the young lady in the middle is Alejandra Ameguin. She is the first, she came here with the U.S. Navy, loved Jacksonville, and stayed here. Got married, raised her family, and then she decided she wanted to open up a business. Well, she's the first Hispanic to, in Jacksonville, to own and operate a yoga studio. And she also has a natural healing health spa as well. So she's very active, and she's still very active with a lot of the veterans associations, to my understanding. Now, Ed Perez is an amazing gentleman as well, and he's one of our honorees. He was employed by CSX as a technical director when they relocated him to Florida. He immigrated from Cuba in 1963, and his village where he grew up was actually one of the villages that Castro's revolutionary forces would bomb. And so he experienced a lot of trauma during that time. He would tell a story that when those bombs are just coming all around you, there's nowhere you can go. There's nothing you can do. You're just kind of waiting there and hoping that you aren't next. So he did experience that trauma, but he has a wonderful outlook on life, and he was very fortunate that he had a mentor who guided him through the process when he moved here to the U.S. He's had a successful 42 years as a CSX executive, but he always dreamed about opening a nonprofit. So in 2016, he became president and CEO and founded 3 Grains of Rice Missions that serves women and children in need. And he works not only locally, but also globally. He has about, 4 or 5 different locations, I think, across the world that he goes to and ministers to. And apparently he just opened up a new office, and I'm not sure where it's located, but he has had some funding to do that. Okay, let me go to the next slide. Some of you might recognize this gentleman on the left, Dr. Norberto Benitez. He's a local. He's been here for many, many years, and he's the founder of the 24/7, what is the name of it? 24/7 Pediatric Care Center, and it's the only 24-hour private pediatric center in the U.S. He's also founder of Bright Eyes Uganda, which is a nonprofit that he created that assists several villages in remote areas of Uganda with health clinics, schools, and also the construction of wells. And because of the programs that his team has put into place in those villages, they are now, the government of Uganda is now bringing the community electricity and running water since the population in those areas has increased. So he's done a wonderful job in his mission there. Now, I have to get to this other group of people there, which you might recognize, one or two of them. Tomas Jimenez is one of our honorees, and he is a force of nature. He has done so much for the community. In 1998, he founded the Mayor's Hispanic American Advisory Board under Mayor John Delaney. And their mission remains the same, to serve as a conduit to bring the Hispanic community closer to city government so the mayor may recognize the concerns, needs, and desires of the Hispanic community. 8 members initially were appointed. Tomas was chairman. Ricardo Morales was vice chair. Gloria Linares was treasurer. Wilfredo Gonzalez, he was with the SBA back then, was in charge of the Economic Development Committee, and then Dr. Gaston Acosta Rua and Dr. Norberto Benitez were the Welfare and Health Committee. Migdalia Figueroa was Public Safety and Legal Affairs, and she was an attorney actually, or she is an attorney, so she really was very valuable to the team as well. Also, I wanted to say that you'll note that 3 of our honorees are serving on this founding committee. That would be Tomas, Dr. Benitez, and Willie Gonzalez on the right, far right. So you can see that they've been here, and that was one of our criteria that we used, was how long had they been in community service here in Jacksonville. And so many of them exceeded 30, 40, 50 years that they've been working here in the community.
For how many years have you been doing the honorees? Is this the first
This is the
year?
first year,
Okay.
and we're hoping that it won't be the last, so we'd like to continue with it. Also, Victor Cora, who is here again when he was very young, he was on the committee as well, and he was actually part of our selection committee, so we figured that with his experience, he would assist us in knowing who has been here around for the longest. So we're very grateful to all of them. And of course to John Delaney, Mayor John Delaney, for having the foresight to see that this was a valuable creation. Okay. In 1998, Tomas Jimenez created the Achieving the Dream Scholarship. And he was, at that time, president and CEO of Jimenez Belisario Enterprises. And of course, he wanted this scholarship program to be for Latino youth in Jacksonville. Now, First Coast Hispanic took over the program in 2010, and they've been managing it since then. And to be quite honest with you, they're doing a stellar job of it. They're continuing with their mission that and they've been helping so many of our youth. And of course, as I said here, until the present, from then until the present, they've awarded almost $600,000 to youth, deserving youth. Okay. In 2000, Julio Fuentes, who is here at the center, moved to Jacksonville from New York. He was an investment banker in New York, and he decided to go into the nonprofit section. So he formed the Florida State Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and he's still very, very active with the same organization. It's grown by leaps and bounds. And he did start off in Jacksonville, but now he's in South Florida. But he is really a very dynamic person, and has done a lot for Hispanics all over the state. Now, Dr. Andres Gallo is in the far right. He is a professor also at the University of North Florida, and he was actually the creator and the original director of UNF's Global MBA program. And now he's also director of the International Business Flagship Program with the Coggin College of Business and he's also an internationally known professor of economics. So he's one of our honorees, as I said, and he's done a lot for students and non-students as well. I think someone said that they had been with Dr. Gallo on one of the trips. Okay.
I went to Peru.
Yes.
He's in my Rotary, so I got to go to Peru
He's in
with
the
his
Rotary,
class
yeah.
and exercise my fluent English. He also heads up for us our international projects, and he works on water projects in Peru as well.
Oh,
Through
really?
the honors program at UNF, so yeah.
I know he does a lot. In fact, he was the one who told me, you have to seek out this priest, Father Rodolfo, because I know he does a lot also for the community through the church. Now, Jorge Lopez, he's the guy who has opened up at least 10 Spanish-speaking radio stations in Jacksonville. He's done that with Northside Media and then also with iHeartRadio. In fact, now he is VP of Sales for iHeartMedia in Tampa and Northeast Florida. And he's also now serving as the chairman of the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Board. So he's one of our honorees, and he's done a great deal for the city. He's done a great deal for us in our program. In fact, he put together 16 spots of little biographies and then had them voiced for his iHeart radio station, for Rumba, and also for Acción News. So they're airing right now. He put up 350 spots for Voces de Hispanos, so he's done a great deal for us as well. We're very grateful to him for that. Also, I mentioned Northside Media. I don't know if you guys ever go to any of the Latin stores, but you might see a magazine that's out in the front on the little news stands, and it's called Hola News. Well, that was originally came about in 2004, and that was Northside Media as well. So they're in different facets of the media industry, not only radio, but also media as well, print media. And I'm not sure, I'm thinking they probably are in the television. So, let me get to the next slide. I have some more people. Okay, we might recognize the person in the center if we go to Havana Jack, Sylvia Pulido. She's been here since, I think, what did I say, 1970 she came, and she's been here a long time. And then also we have Yanira Cardona. She's also been, she came here from Puerto Rico as a young girl and started singing with different local bands, Hispanic bands, and also she's been on the radio for quite some time, and you might hear her. I heard her actually the other day on First Coast Connect. With Al. She is kind of like the person to ask for what's playing where and what's happening in Jacksonville. And a few weeks ago, she was at the Mosh, and she was in charge of the rooftop dance party for Hispanic Heritage. So she's involved in so many things. She's active, to say the least. So she's done quite a bit for the community in that respect. And Andy Grogan is here, featured with Mayor Alvin Brown, and she came from New York and Puerto Rico by way of Puerto Rico and then New York, and then she actually created a nonprofit called The Hill that would assist women in their careers and set them up with different types of resources to find positions in corporate or in offices. So she's been a great mentor for many, many women. In fact, I'm in her little group, and she's helped so many women in our group to find positions and secure job positions. And she's an HR specialist, so she really knows her business, and she also specializes in diversity issues within the workplace. So, very dynamic woman. Okay. I think we're going to recognize the person in the center again, Dr. Constanza Lopez. She's of Colombian heritage. She grew up in New York, and she joined the faculty at UNF, and she created an oral history project there at UNF, and that one is student-run. It's called Voces de Hispanos, Oral History. And she also has her students interview their narrators, and usually they're family members or people in the community that they know. And they have an exhibit once a year in the UNF library. Now, she did write a manuscript entitled Trauma, Memoria y Cuerpo, el Testimonio Femenino en Colombia, which she won several awards for in 2010, and she's one of our honorees. She's also a poet. She runs the Poetry Festival at UNF, and she has a quilt that she has her students do embroidery on for the people who have lost their lives in traumatic encounters, I guess, in Central America or South America. So they have this quilt that they embroider. Every year they add a piece, apparently, and so that's what she's in charge of as well, that quilting. Millie Colon is a radio personality, and she has been here since 2005. She worked for Latino Hits Radio, Caliente Radio, and she's currently at iHeartRadio with Jorge Lopez. Dr. Berta Arias is a Chicago transplant. She grew up in Chicago. Actually, she is from Cuba, but she moved to Chicago at an early age. And she tells a story that she was very fortunate that her father worked for a company, and they transferred him to Chicago about a year prior to Castro's takeover. So she said that she never had to go through all of that, but she feels very fortunate. She is a professor of languages and linguistics, and she taught at the community college and created her own program there. And she also has created a nonprofit organization, and she's opened up a scholarship fund, which is I think at least 10 years or 12 years in the making that she does every year. She contributes and has a scholarship for a worthy student there in the Chicago area. Oh, and she's also, I forgot, she's an environmentalist. She's a tree hugger. She will definitely be there in Amelia Island, where she lives, and in Nassau County, and she's done a lot of activism work there for the environmental movement. Okay, you might recognize a few of these people. Loretta Inclán is of Cuban American descent. She was on the news for quite a while, and you would see her do some wonderful, wonderful interviews. She has many wonderful stories about her family and them escaping from Cuba. She was the one who told me about her uncle coming over on a little raft during the Mariel boat lift from Cuba. Mario de Cunto, who is here in the center to the right, was on the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Board. He is also the chair of the Duval County Hispanic Caucus, Democratic Hispanic Caucus, and he's also, well, he's active in politics, and then he's also a psychologist, a child psychologist to boot. He's been very active in local politics and government, and he was on the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Board. And he also created in 2020 or 2019, I think, the first Heritage Film Festival that was in downtown Jacksonville. And he did that with Eugene Maslowski, who apparently is a film producer. So he's been very active as well. On our left is Betsy Santiago, and she's a native from Puerto Rico. She became the first woman, Hispanic woman, to be appointed to a government position in Jacksonville. And she served as special assistant to Jack's mayor, Alvin Brown. She's now at FSCJ, but she's still very popular, especially on the speaker circuit, in terms of women in leadership. She is also serving on Jacksonville's Charter Revision Commission, and she graduated from the Leadership Academy. Now you might recognize this person in the corner here. She might be among the audience, so if you want to ask for her autograph, we can do it now in a little while. It's Maria Isabel Montoya.
Thank you.
She arrived in Jacksonville in 2013, and she is CEO and president of My Advantage Marketing and Advertising. She's an amazing woman. She began her first business at the age of 17. She opened up her first company. So my hat is off to this lady. She is very business oriented and always thinking. She has not one, not two, not three projects at a time, but 7 or 8, and she's thinking about all of them at once. But she's very creative and talented. Okay, and the person who is right here, who couldn't be with us tonight because she's sick, is Monica Hernandez. She's president of First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Under her leadership, the FCHCC was named Chamber of the Year in 2019. And she's won herself numerous awards during her tenure and has created numerous opportunities for organizational growth, for membership increase, and sponsors. She's a VP of Asset Services and Global Markets at Bank of America, and she's originally from Cali, Colombia. She arrived as a very young girl and grew up in Ocala. So she spent her life there out in the country. She said she loved it. Okay, Rachel Rojas, who we'll see right here, was the regional director for the FBI, and when she was appointed to her position here in Jacksonville, she was the first Hispanic woman to be appointed to that position. And so I was able to interview her, and she's a wonderful lady. She's from New York, and I think she's now back in Washington, D.C. They didn't keep her for long, right here. Erica Weitz. I don't know if many of you are familiar with St. Augustine, but since 2019, we've had this wonderful music festival called, I'm having a brain freeze, Unidos en la Música. Well, her and her husband, Michael, founded that in 2019, and they're still going strong, and she's one of the musicians also. She sings and she does everything. And she's also been a recipient of several awards, and she actually won one last year from the First Coast Hispanic Chamber. If you notice on the far right, we have a sister Chamber of Commerce now, a Hispanic chamber called the Mexican Chamber of Commerce, and it was founded by Zeguino Garcia in 2020, and Anarda Madriaga, Roberto Gonzalez, Diana Hernandez, Abel Hernandez Estudio, and Cesar Bonfil Rubio. And there are 2 of their members there. Cesar is on the left, and David Gonzalez is on the right. So they've been very instrumental in bringing another Latin flavor to the community. In 2021, the census for Jack's Hispanics numbers 11.3% of the population. So we are now at 112,689 Hispanics. So we've grown just a little from that original 42 men and 25 women. So, okay, 2022 here to the present. Acción is the first Spanish speaking 24-hour, 7-day-a-week news station for Hispanics here in Jacksonville. And it was created by Jorge Lopez. And if you'll notice, the picture in the center is a mural, the First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, in concert with the Jaguars and let me see, there's one more. The Cultural Council of Jacksonville, 3 of them. The Cultural Council, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the First Coast Hispanic Chamber of Commerce all put their monies together and had that created by a muralist. And there's the artist at the bottom, Whitney Perez. She has some beautiful artwork that she does, and she's from Puerto Rico, and she is of the Taino indigenous descent. So, and she's very proud of that, and if you look at her webpage, you can see these beautiful, beautiful paintings of the indigenous peoples. So she's very creative, and I love her use of colors. Okay, if you'll notice in the far right upper corner, this was my first class, graduating class, so to speak, of my narrators that I did in 2021. Monica and Maria Isabel and Betsy, Andrea Reyes, and Ed Bettis were all some of my original narrators that I had to bring along, and they were very kind and generous, and I was lucky, and I was able to get 40 interviews. And so those are now archived at the Jacksonville Historical Society. And also I might add that Dr. Benitez is going to be archived here. So that will be kind of cool, so that you guys will have one of Dr. Benitez. Then the following year, in 2022, Monica and Maria Isabel asked if I was interested in sponsorship, and I said, I think so. And so now they've become my main sponsors, and I rely on them heavily for everything. So I have to say that with a note of gratefulness and appreciation, because they have believed in the mission and seen the value that this has had historically. When I first started everything, there weren't any oral history, except for Constanza Lopez doing it at UNF, but there weren't any oral history projects here in the city of Jacksonville, and now we have, we're contributing to the St. Augustine Historical Society, to the Jacksonville Historical Society, to Amelia Island Museum of History, and to Clark County Archives. So the project has grown, and we will be depositing voices there as well. So it's growing. I have to go to my most important page, I hope. Oh, okay. Indira Moran is one of our honorees, and she is an amazing lady. She came here from Chile. She's named after Indira Gandhi, and she actually got to meet Indira Gandhi in real life. And when she came, apparently for the first 2 years that she was here, she came with a family, and she was very green, so to speak, and was never paid. So she was literally, working in slave labor. So she asked for assistance and got it, and she finally was able to get out from that and got her work permit, and after that she said, I'm working for the cause for immigrants who come to this country, and she started 2 organizations, grassroots organizations in the Washington, D.C. area. She worked in Washington, D.C. for a number of government agencies, and then she moved to Virginia and was actually appointed by Governor Mark Warner to the Medicaid board and then to the another board of the Immigrant Action. So she's been very, very active in that. Now, she's one of the co-founders of the Northeast Florida Immigrant Resource Alliance with her co-founder, or with the founder, Amelia, who is a legal, has a legal practice and specializes in immigration work. So together they form quite a powerful coalition, and they're working for the betterment of the immigrant community. Okay, these are the others, I would like to call them the new group that just came along. Andy de Rosal is of Cuban ancestry. His family is rather well known in Cuba especially, and maybe locally, because he's part of the Bacardi family. He is a chemist, and he is now Vice President of Product Innovation and Liquid Quality in Bacardi Limited's global supply chain. But interestingly, during COVID, if you recall, we couldn't find hand sanitizer anywhere. Well, Andy went and negotiated with the head of the FDA in alliance with the spirit industry, the liquor industry, and they were able to get a chemical formula for hand sanitizer, and they mass produced it here at the Bacardi factory and other spirit companies, and they were able to give it to first responders here in Jacksonville and all over Florida. Well, that wasn't enough for Andy. What did he do? He went and started producing hand sanitizers at the Bacardi factories and facilities that were worldwide that they have. And he ended up producing it for all the first responders in those respective communities that the Bacardis were in. So I thought that was pretty amazing that he went really the extra mile and for the cause of humanity, if we all recall that time. Dr. Anne Browning Masters, apparently you guys have 2 volumes, or 2 copies of the book right here in your library. She's a wonderful poet. She's a Floridana, she's a 12th generation Floridana, and a 10th generation, I think, Menorcan. Her book is Floridanos, Menorcans, and Cattle-Whip Crackers, Poetry of St. Augustine. And it's now in its 2nd printing, and it's been archived in the Florida State Historical Archives. In March of 2022, the Menorcan Cultural Society appointed her as St. Augustine's Menorcan Poet Laureate. So, and also for her commitment to promoting St. Augustine's Spanish heritage, Dr. Masters was knighted by the St. Augustine Easter Festival in 2015. So she's had several honors, and she's a knight. And she's one of our honorees, and she's a wonderful person and very knowledgeable. In fact, she told us that the Dattle peppers didn't really come from Florida. And she said, I know a lot of people are turning over in their graves right now, but it was not. We don't know where it came from, so she's doing a study now on the Dattle pepper. Jorge Peña is an amazing gentleman. Along with his wife, Korean cellist Jin Kim Peña, Jorge co-founded the St. Augustine Music Festival. If you notice that there was some music playing at the beginning, that was a composition that he had commissioned for the St. Augustine Music Festival, and he agreed to loan it to us so that we could play it in conjunction with the exhibit. The St. Augustine Music Festival has been in existence since 2006, and it'll be celebrating its 18th anniversary in the summer of 2024, and it's the largest free chamber music festival in the U.S. So it's free. Your admission is free. All you have to do is just register. He's also a violist with Jacksonville Symphony and has been there for 26 years. So he's been in the community a long time. Now, Derby Ulloa. Are any of you familiar with those statues that are near the river, that are the river runners? This is the gentleman that created them. That's his vision. He was hired by the running club, and first he did the male, and then he did the female a few years later. And he's also the official portrait sculptor for the Florida Georgia Hall of Fame, and he was that for 15 years. And one of his pieces is a caricature of Bob Hope as an elephant. And it's part of the Bob Hope art collection that is displayed in the Library of Congress. So he's been really prolific in all his things. So that's the end of my presentation. I thank you. And there are all the partnerships that we've created. So
That's good.
thank you so much. And I'm hoping that we'll get another one with Beaches Museum in the near future. Thank you most of all for coming in the rain. I really appreciate that tonight.
How many people were recognized altogether?
16. We had to kind of limit it because this is our first year.
A lot of ones.
But I think that next year, I'm hoping that maybe we can increase it and we'll see what we can do.
How about Judge Roberto Ives?
I didn't have a chance to interview him. But yeah, he's on my list. And
Where do you
definitely-
store these things, these interviews?
They are stored at the Jacksonville Historical Society
Okay.
archives. One of them will be stored here for Dr. Benitez. And then some are stored at the Amelia Island Museum of History, some are stored at Clay County Archives, and then some are stored at St. Augustine Historical Society.
And you can't access those digitally